Good morning and welcome to God is Dead. Are you sure, Todd?
Are you sure?
Well, I know he died on the cross
Yes, he did. And he rose on the third day.
and he rose on the third day. That's what they say. That's the rumor. Very interesting. How you doing this week?
I'm doing good. Yeah. How are you by yourself?
Doing well. Doing well. There's a lot going on.
There is. It's a busy time.
The sunshine is out, although it's getting to be a different type of year. It's not staying as light out as long.
Oh, really? I feel like it stays. Is it usually like past 10 or?
Well, I don't know, but normally, I can tell by the time I do my nightly workout,
Okay.
which I usually try to do it at 8:30.
Okay.
And I noticed just the last few days I've had to turn the light on in the gym.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we're on the back end now for sure. Yeah.
It's just the days aren't as long
Yeah.
as they were in the past. But that's the change of seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Time is always moving forward. So no matter what happens in your life, I think time is always moving forward.
Mm.
If you have catastrophe or disaster in your life, the world doesn't stop.
Mm.
I think that's always an interesting thing to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, some people they value their job. They think about their job and they might think, oh man, I'm irreplaceable. Guess what? You're not. The job's going to go on. The business is going to go on. If you own your own business and you do work for a client and you think, oh man, we do such a good job. Guess what?
That client's going to last forever. Yeah.
If you stop servicing that client, they'll just find somebody else.
Or the client may go away, right?
Or the client might go away.
Blockbuster, we talk about that all the time. People thought that was, they're invincible.
In your marriage, in your boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, if you go away, somebody else will fill those shoes. As disappointing as that might be to hear. And it might be better. It might be worse, but time always moves on. Time is never stopping. It's never stopping for you. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't care if it's war or famine or feast. Time is always moving. And I think that as time moves, so does our relationship with God. And I think we only have so much time to share the gospel. You only have so much time to share the gospel with those you love. Are we put on this earth to go wakeboarding and surfing and working? And is that what we're put on the earth to do? It's a good question because time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
Have you used the years of your life wisely? Have you shared God with everybody you could share God with? Have you taken every opportunity to honor him and talk about him? When the roll gets called up, will it be good and faithful servant? You think about the story in the Bible where the man comes to Jesus and, he says, I've done all the things. I've honored my mother and my father.
Kept all the laws.
I've done everything. And Jesus says, go sell all your possessions and give them to the poor. And I think, come follow me. And then you will have that everlasting life. And he leaves sad. And God says, it is tougher for a rich man to enter heaven than get through the eye of a needle or whatever.
Yeah.
And they say, well, then how can anybody be saved? And he says, through God alone.
Mm.
You think about that. Is that a real story? Is that a real requirement? Like, if God went to you today and said, Todd, give everything you have to the poor, sell all your possessions, and come follow me. Could you do it?
It's a great question. I think you hit it, and you pinpointed it a little bit, is the reliance on God. And I think in faith, in our faith, is do we it's a trust or a faith issue, right? Do we trust God above all things? And I think obviously in our lives, I think there's areas where there's going to be struggles, right? When we're talking about our own walks with God, or where we are with God, or our circumstances, or maybe you can not to get too in depth about it, but or deep about it, but it's what family you're born into or what situation, right? I mean, those are all things that kind of your experience bring up, but it's do we trust God in that moment? I would hope that, hey, when there's a calling, that we follow that. And it was interesting because I was reading in Galatians this morning, in Galatians 6, and Paul started talking about more about comparison and the burden, like weighing the burdens of others above yourself, and carrying the loads of others, and that humility piece. And we touched on this in the previous podcast about humility, and I think that's a big part of that, is can we humble ourselves, and follow God, right? Number one, because I think you can't love your neighbor, you can't serve others if you're not serving and following, obviously, and what I believe, following God, and Galatians 6 kind of talks about that. Each one should test your own actions, and you mentioned time, and there's going to come a time. We don't know Jesus said we don't know the hour, right? But what I believe is that Jesus will return, that there will be a day where we will face God and we'll hold an account of our lives. What was interesting is, this is kind of talking about, and comparing. It's easy for us to compare others in this society today. And in Galatians 6, it kind of talks about, look at your brother and serve them, but know that you can't boast on their actions, right? You can't. So on that last day, it's like when we're accounting for our life before God, I can't use someone else's. We're only using ours. So my calling obviously is going to be specific to what the purpose that God has for my life. But I think the focus is having that gospel-centered focus where, we can get caught up, I think, in the day-to-day and lose focus as a believers of our purpose of number one, which is leading others to him, and obviously witnessing, right, and sharing the gospel and the good news. Jesus did that obviously during his ministry. That was the focus and the heart of it. And in the sake of time, his ministry wasn't very long, right? It was only several years. So, how we maximizing that now. Obviously, he grew into that full-time ministry, but test your own actions is what it says in Galatians. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else, for each should carry their own load. So I think whatever God calls you to, what's his will on your life, and are we seeking that? And I think the way you can do that is obviously through prayer and seeking him, right? Seek first the righteousness of God.
I'm going to tell you the story. There was, have you ever been to a deep sea port? Have you ever seen a deep sea port?
Yeah, I've seen one, yeah.
Okay.
Never been.
There was a man and his wife, and They had a couple of kids, but one of their kids was just like a year and a half old, a boy, baby boy. And you remember when your kids are about a year and a half old, they're walking, they're kind of moving around and smiling and losing balance, but they do all sorts of crazy things. And on this particular day, the sun's out, it's shining, and they're going to check out the ships at the pier. And so there's a large concrete deck, and it got a large bullnose lip that kind of goes over the top, and then just right off the pier, the water comes up to the pier, and there's no rails or guards or anything like that on the pier. And the pier itself is, just, it's old. It's been there a long time. Well, they get out of the car, and they let the 1.5-year-old kind of run loose, and on this particular day, the tide is out. And the tide's out, and so it's a very rare day where you can see on this seaport, you can actually see the sand. You can see where the sand is at, and that's about a 30-foot drop. So there's the pier and the bullnose, and then it goes straight down, and then it's just all sand, and then the water's coming in, and you can see the pier legs. And you've probably seen when the tide is way out,
Yep,
that sometimes you can see things like that. And the little boy walks to the edge, and he kind of wobbles, and he falls 30 feet. And over to the right is the pier that kind of jutties out, and then there's ladders that go down. And the man sees it, and he's like, "Oh my gosh." And I can only imagine the feeling, but the heart just sinks, right? You know that feeling of heart sinking?
Yep.
Like you can't, I don't even know if words can describe the heart sink, but his heart sinks, and he's like, "Okay, I got to get over there. I got to get down there. I got to get him. Is he dead?" Well, this is ground that's rarely ever exposed. And what happens is the baby like lifts his head up and moves, and he kind of crawls, and he's like, "Oh man." He's like, maybe it was soft enough for him to be okay. And the baby takes 2 steps forward, and the sand just swallows him. Takes him right under.
No way.
Yeah. So the guy's like, "Oh my God, what am I going to do?" So he jumps. And in his head, he's like, "I know I'm going to break my legs." I mean, he's just like going through this, but he jumps.
Yeah. Do whatever you take.
And sure enough, he hits the ground and breaks his legs. But he starts digging ferociously in the sand, trying to find his baby. But he can't find the baby. Can't get him. Can't find him. The sand just ate him. Like it just swallowed him whole. And as he's frantically looking, the waves start to come back in. And the water starts to come back in. And now the sand can't see it. And he starts to raise to the top, and they call the ambulance and the divers and all. They never find the baby.
Wow.
Gone forever. The port fills back up. The guy has got broken legs. He's depressed. Just in that instant, imagine the baby walking to the edge, waddling, and then just blindly taking a crazy step right off.
Yeah.
Hitting the ground, getting on all fours, taking a few steps forward, and then whoosh, suffocated, swallowed.
Like seeing a little glimpse of hope in the moment, right? Because you don't know initially, but
And
you see
then
it moving. Yeah,
as a dad,
can't imagine.
just jumping.
Wouldn't you? I mean, obviously you do it or you can. I mean,
The man says, what kind of God allows this to happen? Angry,
yeah,
burdened, lost. What a tragic story.
Mhm.
Could you imagine seeing that?
no, not as a dad. I mean, I think that's the worst nightmare as a parent. You know, is obviously to see your kid obviously, I mean, not only suffer, but obviously go through a tragedy like that. I couldn't imagine. I mean, just
What does
going
God tell
through,
us in that moment?
I mean, I think that's a deep question. You know, I think there's a purpose. You know, I believe that. You know, as hard as that is to say, and you know, we go to Romans 8:28. That's a verse that I know in my life in some of the dark days and those moments, right? I mean, um, thankfully we've never experienced death, you know, like that for one of our kids, you know, and pray that we never have to. But going through some tougher times with kids, with some sicknesses and some issues, you know, that they've gone through, and you know, it looked like one especially with our first, when he was 6 months, so he had a crazy allergic reaction, and we thought it was going down a crazy path. But you know, in those moments, I remember being in that hospital bed, and the one moment I remember, and you know, obviously it's not comparing it to losing him, but we were, you know, you kind of go down that path mentally, you know, as you're preparing, you know, for the worst. And I remember being in that hospital bed or hospital room, and he's on this table, and the doctors are kind of scrambling in that moment to figure out how they want to do surgery or what's the direction they want to take. And I remember him looking up, and he's got these blue lips, and you know, he's kind of just very lethargic looking, and you know, 6 months old, so can't say a word, you know. And I remember just being there, you know, at the time Katie was exhausted. I think we'd been up for like 2 straight days at that point. And I remember just praying, you know, Lord, your will be done in that simple moment, you know. And you know, I can't say what would have happened if I lost Mason, you know, or if I lose a child, because obviously I didn't experience that. But in that moment, it was all I could do was pray that it was in his hands. Now, thankfully, obviously Mason pulled through, and you know, they figured it out, and you know, he's a healthy kid, and overall, you know, obviously, you know, very healthy. But I remember in that moment is, you know, just if it's kind of that moment of if it does happen, can I continue to follow you and trust you, right? And I think everyone's tragedies, everyone's suffering, obviously is different. And you know, thankfully I had you know, my relationship with God, which I didn't always have. I often wonder what it would be like if I didn't have a relationship, or even if, you know, what that would look like if I did have a tragedy. But I'm thankful that I do have that relationship, and I can trust that. But it's tough. I know in that moment, you know, it was a test that, you know,
I wonder if I
there.
could be
So,
thankful.
you know, yeah, could you be thankful for it? Yeah. I mean, and that's the question. Is Mason pulled through, so you know, I can't say, you know, that if it did go down that other path, like this guy had to experience, what would that relationship be like, you know? And my prayer is that God will, you know, my relationship would continue to be there, but it's tough to say.
What is
and
that
it's hard to say,
conversation like?
you know?
Why didn't you hold the baby? Why would
Yeah.
you let him out of the
Why didn't you
car?
let me know? Or
Why
you know,
would you do that?
Yeah.
Why is he running free? What is going on?
Yeah.
Don't you know?
Yeah. But and then like to yourself, right? Because you probably go through all.
Why
those
couldn't I
things.
get there faster?
Yeah.
Why wasn't I paying attention?
Yeah. Why did I even go here? Or like, you know, you start probably going through those
All
just
of
those
that,
human
all
you know,
of that,
feelings that you're
all
gonna
of that negative
experience. Yeah.
self-talk.
And,
It's
but,
tough.
yeah, but it's trusting. I think it's just it's a trust and faith issue. And for those who may not believe, obviously, that there is a God, or I often, for me, it's tough for me to imagine what my life would be like, if I didn't know Him, right? Like, what would that look like? And the moments that He has, gotten me through some tougher times and tougher moments, and you can rely on that, and
I
I
think
think
I
it's,
think you got to be thankful,
you know,
as hard as that is.
mm,
I think you got to remember the good times. You got to focus on what was there. And I know we're getting close to time here, but I think the biggest thing is this. This is how I would personally deal with it, and God willing, I never have to go through anything like that in my life. But I think that the way that I would look at that is life is really hard. Life is really disappointing in a lot of ways. And it's beautiful in a lot of ways too, right? But there's always trials, there's always issues. There's always things. And you look at your kids going through high school, and you look at the bullying that they might have to go through, or you look at the what happens if they get hooked on drugs, or what if they go to jail, or what if they what if. There's all these what ifs of just tough stuff. And I think in that moment, the things that I would be thankful for are, one, I know that baby's going to heaven because it's just innocent.
mm-hmm.
So I know we'll see you soon.
Yeah.
I know that. I can take 100% in that. I don't have to
Yeah.
worry
Yeah.
that they don't love the Lord.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to stress on that. And then piece number 2 is like, what was God saving us from? And then piece number 3 is they don't have to go through any of the hardships.
Mm.
Like sometimes I even question, like, what's the point of having kids?
Mm.
I do. Like, I think, man, it's such a hard world. Why would anybody bring kids into this world? It's so tough. It's so brutal. It's so just whatever. And there's so many amazing moments with kids that you'd never not want to have your kids, right? But I also think in that moment you have to focus on
What is good?
what you can.
Yeah.
And at that moment what you can, and then lean into prayer and lean into recovery and lean into the church and lean into God. And sometimes you don't search for answers. But then at that point I would also suggest, finding a mentor. Somebody who's also lost a young child. I think that's really important. Somebody that you can talk to, somebody that has been there. I don't think that it helps you at all to talk to somebody who's never been through that.
Yeah.
So somebody that can console and talk and walk you through that. And then you got to keep living, because in that tragedy, your world stops, but the world around you keeps going. It doesn't stop. It won't wait for you. And I believe we are called to share the gospel. And you got to find a way to share the gospel through that suffering, through that pain. That might become your story. That might become your life mission.
Part of it. Yep.
That might become everything you're about. I don't know that. But what I do know is that kids are lost every single day.
Yeah.
Kids are lost to drugs. Kids are lost to death. Kids are lost to sex trafficking. Kids are lost to war.
Yep. Cancer.
Kids are lost every single day.
Yep.
And I think what we've got to do is stay focused, stay driven, keep our eyes on God, keep thankful, and God willing, I never have to go through anything like that.
Yeah.
God willing, I don't have to experience that. And the only thing that I can share is that time moves on. Time does heal wounds. And time doesn't stop for us. Time doesn't
Yeah.
stop for you, and it doesn't stop for me.
Yep.
And things are going to happen.
And I think you mentioned that on time. I mean, obviously for that baby, that time was very limited. I mean, and obviously a year and a half, or but one of the certainties in life is death,
Mm-hmm.
and it's gonna, whether that's today or decades or whatever that may be, there is an end point, right, on that timeline of
Yeah.
whatever it is. And I think what the gospel centered focus should be is, one, for those who believe, is we talked about initially, that God rose on the third day. He overcame death. I think that's the ultimate, that's the ultimate weapon of the enemy is death. And I think a lot of people fear that, right? But for those who believe, we can take hope that we're going to see loved ones again who believe, and the innocent and the kids. And I think in that timeline, what are we, you said it many times. I mean, there's 168 hours in a week,
Yep.
right? And, one thing that it's amazing, just, that how you focus on what are we doing with that time. And obviously there's a lot of purpose. I mean, whether it's, your health, your finances, your work, I mean, there's a lot of purpose in all those things. And I think God uses those things too. But it's keeping that gospel center focus, it's just a great reminder. I know even for me and listen on our listeners, and it's just, how are we filling those hours and those minutes, right? Those weeks, the days, years, where is that going, and what's the purpose? And the purpose for those who believe is sharing the gospel, and that can mean in different ways. And I think, you touch on it, like, so whether it's suffering, it's death, it's, our testimonies and how God uses that. I mean, how many amazing stories, that you hear from people, and a lot of it is, the most powerful stories is overcoming a trial, overcoming a suffering or a tragedy, and how God can redeem that. I think that's what's the cool thing is in Jesus, and looking to Christ, is that redemptive nature and overcoming it. And obviously that's the greatest story of redemption in history, right? And overcoming that death and that sorrow. I mean, you think of the disciples during that time and his followers who were, so sad, right? I mean, just like we lost, right, during the crucifixion, and almost the disbelief, obviously, and after the fact. So I think just encourage those to keep that focus, sit around your life and think about, hey, God, where do you want me? Where can I serve? And seek him out first. So some great points. Good topic.
I love the song, God's Not Dead. No, he is alive.
Amen.
That's awesome. Powerful story.
It is.
Stressful story.
It is. You got me. I know I'm gonna call my kids and my wife right after this. Don't go to a pier. Number one, don't go. Yeah, but
we always got to be watching as parents.
Yeah, you do, especially when they're young, man.
Right? Like
Yeah.
just the.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to fall because you think like that's it. Oh my God, goner.
Yeah.
But then it's another thing for the sand just to.
Oh yeah, that's crazy. I mean, just the visual of that swallowing up your child. I mean, just yeah.
And then where did they go?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. We were just recently on a little hike with it, and we took the dog to the dog park, and there's like a just big wooded area, giant, like, probably a couple acres, right, or more. And I had my two daughters, and I was with the dog and my youngest, but our other two daughters were just playing hide and seek through the woods or whatever. But all of a sudden, like, I was yelling for them, and I couldn't hear them. And it was like just that initial thought, like right away is like, oh, it's come, like I was on a hunt though. And so to that point of that adrenaline, and like, it was just like a couple weeks ago. And of course, like, they were fine. They were just in some backwooded area, couldn't hear me, but it's just like that moment of helplessness it kicks in. And so, but be thankful for your kids, and thankful for the life and the time you have though. Right. I mean, how precious time is, and it is limited.
I'll tell you that, one of the things that happens is I have a house on the peninsula, on the Olympic Peninsula. And the Olympic Peninsula, where we live, it kind of, it's like a shoehorn that kind of shoots out like this, and then we have a house that's kind of right like that, right?
Mhm.
So you can kind of see that, right? You can kind of see that if you're on the camera. And one of the things that happens, and I would say we see this once every few months, is that there is waves that are coming in here like this. And what I'll tell you is that the tide moves in faster than you think it's going to move in. Always does. And when the tide comes way out, the ground is very soft. That sand, that water soaked sand is very soft. And what you find is you find a lot of deer out here. So they're not big deers. They're not like full grown bucks or anything like that, but they're not babies either.
Yeah.
They're like teenagers.
Adolescents, I guess we would call them.
Yeah. But you know what? You always find them dead out here. And you know why?
Mhm.
It's because they got caught in the tide. They got caught. The tide caught them coming back. And what happened is they got stuck out there and they couldn't get out. They couldn't get back. They couldn't get back from the bulkhead, or they couldn't get back, from the trees, or they couldn't get back.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't get to safety. And so every so often we'll be here and we'll just come across a deer that's just rotting on the beach. Nobody cleans them up. They'll sit there, but you give that 2 or 3 days, that thing's gone.
Mm.
Whether it got swallowed up or eaten by crabs or whatever, that ocean moves that thing along, right?
Yep.
But that's another example of just how dangerous that is. And I remember one time we were here and some people were staying at our house and their kid was on the beach and they got confused about where the house was. And so they walked all the way over here and it was getting dark. So they came from the house and they came all the way over here and they were lost. They were confused. They thought they were walking towards the house, but they were actually walking away. And the tide was starting to come in. And they were searching for like an hour.
Wow.
Oh my gosh, where's our kid? Where's our kid? And the neighbors are all, knocking on the doors and the neighbors are all out looking for the kids. And one neighbor finds the lost kid. It's like, oh man, she was all the way down on the beach. And it's so lucky that we found her because the tide was coming in. And she could have been lost forever. And it was getting dark.
Yeah.
And when it gets dark there, it's dark. And not dark like...
Yeah, no street lights.
It's dark, But how life, time, is always moving so fast. And, we get 168 hours with our family, with our life every single week. And some quick math on that, if you kind of think about it, is, in your week, if you think about what you've got, you got 168 hours every week. Well, 8 hours every day is sleeping, so you lose 56 to sleep, right? And then you lose probably another 50 to work, right? So now we do that, but now we got to eat. So we probably lose another 14, to eating. And then, for the average guy, maybe it's going to take 7 hours of just getting ready for dinner, for bed, getting ready for work, whatever. For the average woman, it might take 21. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. But,
commute,
they just take a long time, 7. Yeah, you've got some commute hours in there. Maybe you've got 5 hours of commute, in that time. That's 118 hours. And so you break that down, you only have 50 hours left. You divide that by 7, you got 7 hours a day. Maybe to do what you want to do. Maybe to spend time with your family. Maybe to do something. If those things add up. If you have to work a second job, it's less. If you're going to school and working at the same time, it's less. So if you think about that, you got 7 hours a day, but it's probably more like 4 hours a day by the time you've commuted and rested and
Yeah, it's miscellaneous. Yeah.
all of the little things. So you don't have much time every day, right?
Yep.
Because life takes so much time. And if you think about it, you got 4 hours a day times 365 days equals 1,400 hours a year. 1,460 times 18. If you have kids, you really only have 26,280 hours that you're going to see your kids. That's it, 26,000 hours. When that's gone, what happens? It's gone. You don't get any more.
Yeah.
When those hours click off the top, you don't get any more time to share the gospel. So who am I sharing the gospel with? And I got to think friends and family are the most important. If we're not sharing the gospel with our friends and family, we're missing the boat.
Yeah.
That's what we've got for you today.
Yeah,
that was a
that's
great
great.
episode, a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And the mission of today is just remember, time is so important. Your time in this world never stops. So use your time wisely, because you never know how much time you have left. You never know, like the man on the pier, if all you get with your child is 18 months. You never know. You never know how much time is there. You're not guaranteed tomorrow. We're not guaranteed today. We're not guaranteed another hour. Yeah. Spend it wisely.
Value that time.
Honor the Lord and share the gospel. Because at the end of the day, when you're called up, there's nothing more important than spending that time with God.
That's awesome.
All right. If you liked our show, give us a like, give us a share, and follow us. I'm your host, Dave Westcott. I've got with me this morning co-host Todd Chapman. LinkedIn is the best way to reach me, so shoot me a PM, shoot me a direct message. Let's connect. Subscribe on our YouTube channel. Check out Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We're hanging out there. Give us a like, a share. Drop some comments in the comments box. If you like this episode, if you like this show, definitely give us a share and tell us what's going on in your world. We'd love to hear from you. Any final thoughts, Todd?
No, value the time. I mean, that's the takeaway for me is, value the time. I had a mentor years ago, and, it was, I think I may have shared it even on this podcast, but he just said, hold everything loosely except Christ, except Jesus.
I'm a believer in that.
And then little did he know, is a few years later, he passed because of some heart issues, and so his widow and I talk about that, just that message that he left them as kind of a legacy, which I just relate to this topic of value the time, value your moments,
value the time
with your family, those close loved ones, and obviously the Lord, number one.
That's right.
So, yeah, great topic.
You heard it here first, or maybe second or third. Have a great day. We'll see you next week or in 2 weeks.
See you guys.
Adios.